Let's get to our next discussion of the day now. Following the outcome of the recently concluded general election, the People's Democratic Party has been thrown into crisis and confusion. The party lost presidential election in the southeast and south-south regions, once considered its stronghold due to a number of factors, including the role played by the G5 governors led by Rivers State Governor Nyesome Wike. The governors urged their people to vote against the PDP, which saw the party losing states like Rivers and the others. The National Working Committee of the PDP has now suspended some of its prominent members for engaging in anti-party activities. They include former governor of Ekiti State, Fayose, former Senate President Fayose Anyim, and among others. In a new twist, the national chairman of the People's Democratic Party, Senator Iyochayu, has been suspended by the Benue State chapter of the party for also engaging in anti-party activities. So we're talking about all of these on the program now. Joining us to discuss this is a PDP chieftain, Shema. It's nice to have you join me this morning.
It's nice to be here. Good morning.
Welcome. All right, at the course of the program, other guests, Biodun, will be joining us as well. But let's kickstart this way. Now, Shegun, you have been in the PDP for a long time.
Forever.
And you understand the ins and the outs of the party, the ups and the downs of the party. I recall I had you on the program after the 2015 election. We analyzed what the challenges were and how PDP can come out. So you've been on ground. Now, the 2023 election, one would expect that in the build-up, all of the things that happened, this time will be used to reconcile and all of that, because now, as much as some issues are still in court, but one way or the other, the election has come and gone. But how would the party, put this house together, call everybody in, and let us see for a reconciliation and so on? But that's not what we're seeing in the PDP. We're seeing suspensions upon suspension, which is widening the gap that we were thinking was going to close.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for reminding me about our 2015.
Yeah, of course.
You will recall at that time I had said that a political party that loses the general election, which we lost to the Buhari presidency, that it must understand that its responsibility is not to think that it has to win every election. That it must action itself, organize itself in such a way that it can be a strong platform in office if they win, and a strong platform in case they don't win. Because occasionally parties will lose. You see, they didn't learn from that. I added something we had a review at that time. And I remember that myself and my friends were at that review, and I was to represent the younger ones, so they called us then. And I said, you cannot reform a party with the consciousness with which you caused the trouble. It's exactly where we are now. To say that I am utterly disappointed in all of this suspension glee that is going on is to put it mildly. It is sheer irresponsibility on the part of the leadership of the party, and Yoshua Ayu and then have to hold themselves responsible here because they are the chief accounting officer of the party in an ESCO function. They should know for a fact that we can't have the kind of outcome we had in the 2023 election, which, in my opinion, we lost by ourselves. APC does not have the capacity to beat us because of internal crisis. Okay, that has happened. We're struggling in court. What's the next thing to do? You can't go on a frolic of trying to suspend people that you already know their position. If you're suspending Fayose, are you pretending like you don't know that there's a G5 that has a dramatically opposed position? And then when you go and do that, what exactly are you expecting? You're expecting those people that have that position to be quiet. Now they've gone on to suspend you. So I'll just say that you cannot solve a problem with the consciousness you created it. In the first instance, it is a failing of the NWC for them to imagine that across board, there's so much problem within the party at state levels, at different levels, that they couldn't reconcile, they couldn't solve one. Everybody is fixated on the G5. There are problems in other states that they didn't even bother to solve. And, one gets the impression that the PDP keeps holding its breath, thinking that it doesn't have to reform itself, it doesn't have to improve itself, it doesn't have to review its own laws and its operational manual until the next election, and that they will just get by, We didn't get by in 2019. We have not gotten by again in 2023. And instead of us to accept that, okay, we need to stop digging now. We need to tell everybody, okay, guys, there's enough sin to go around. Can we all just come back to the table now and determine for ourselves what we want to do with this party, even if not for you, the ones that have been governors, this, that, for the others that are coming and the teaming young people. Why don't you just calm down for a second and begin a rapprochement to bring everybody back? How are you going to do that if the next thing you're doing is slamming them? Okay, you have said you suspended Fayose. As far as you look like a person that really gives 2F about what you're saying, then you've added Shema to it, adding more problems to us in the north. Then you've added our former Senate President, Anyim, to it. Then you've added, and now they've added Ayu to it. So where does it stop? Now, if you see a political party as a test of will, of strong forces, you have to understand that actions have consequences. So I would just say, we need to pull ourselves back from the brink. We need to call a stakeholder meeting to review precisely why and how did we get ourselves into this mess. I remember there was a meeting that was called in that same NWC and in our office, and they were trying to get ready for the election. I said there, I said we have two problems on our hand we have to solve. We can pretend, we can agonize, we can sidestep, we can arrogantly think it will work. We have an OB problem, and suddenly an OB problem is biting us in the ass now. I said we have a Wike problem. And I was trying to say to us that it's no longer possible for us to see Governor Wike as just one governor. The mere fact that he's able to have about 5 or 6 tendencies within the party to really follow him, and a lot of states that don't have governors like Cross Rivers and Kano to follow him, has already given us a territorial problem. And you can't just wish it away. We have seen the result. Okay, we're in the tribunal. Like we're going to go and produce, magic there. Or we're going to say that we don't understand how difficult it is to prove election cases, given the limited number of time you even have to call witnesses, given the position of INEC, who is not going to be cooperative with you, so to speak, and given the fact that the people that you're challenging are going to come with their own lawyers and their own argument to say, could we not have avoided all this? In the last couple of years, APC has got us into a mess of us not even being able to find money. They ran a policy on their own that has made everybody in the country uncomfortable. We couldn't punish them. They ran the longest, strike that affected university students staying at home. We couldn't punish them. They had the longest fuel queue, no petrol, no whatever in this country. We couldn't punish them. All the indicators say that they are not doing well on unemployment, national stability is bad. We couldn't punish them. And when you look at why we couldn't punish them, you will just put it down to the mismanagement of the party by those that had the responsibility. And if Yoshe Ayu is the chairman now, he can't escape from the responsibility of how the hell did we even get to a place where we couldn't even reason with ourselves, we couldn't bring ourselves to the table. And you have to juxtapose us to our rivals. When the APC was going to do their primaries, by all intents and purposes, I actually thought that they were going to implode. Because too many people were buying the form, strong people were buying the form. The conversation was, very heated. They were running a pre-primary campaign as though it was a general election. And lo and behold, somebody became their candidate. And it was almost magical. You really didn't hear anybody, ventilating too angry. Some people were angry. You have somebody in Rivers like Amici who's a little bit, not so. But you saw that they understood that you can't be playing politics of losing an election with your personal heart. And none of them was going out of their way to make their party lose. How did the PDP, the oldest, most consistent political party that had 16 years in power, we still have about 13 governors or thereabout until some of them started jumping, how did they become a party that don't get the message that, okay, personal crisis on one side, election and trying to lose election on one side, and we are trying to teach them with our own conduct. I have my issues with them in Ogun. But when it was crunch time, I didn't allow the whole thing to go to blow up in our faces. I got into the field. I ran very hard. I stood by the party. We got what we could get. And we're now so convinced that we want that election, that because of the margin of lead, rule. And the people who are supposed to know better think that the best thing for them to do now while we're even trying to figure out how to do do the tribunal, the best thing for them to do is to put us in the news for all of the wrong reason. When you were suspending all these guys, what were you really expecting? You were expecting them to listen to your suspension and then just go home. Now they've gone to simulate a suspension for you. Does it even make sense that we're saying that the national chairman of our party is suspended from his ward? So I want to just beg them, if you have had your field day with this party, in the interest of democracy and participatory party democracy, can you just all just go and let some of us come and rebuild this party and get other people? And one other thing, the PDP needs to understand very clearly, the word on the streets about this last election is not a reflection of the fact that people are thinking PDP has been cheated. If there be any anger, it is the anger of young people, maybe misplaced, maybe not misplaced, I don't know. But the anger that you see is about maybe Peter Obi did not win, not about us. People don't have a lot of sympathy for the fact that we didn't do well. And the other will smell the coffee and calm down and start looking at how to rebuild this party, the better for us. Because at the end of the day, if everybody were to ship out of PDP and run into the party that they claim has won the presidential election now, we're just going to go there and implode it. And it will not even resemble the party anymore. So for the general interest of democracy, multi-party democracy, political parties must learn to be stable. And in building stability, you can throw the books at people. But before you throw the books at your big, so to speak, players, you better measure to be sure that they don't have enough reason or enough grounds to be this angry. So I will just say, Mr. Chairman, no. Reverse these things, bring everybody back to the table, and let's start building for the future.
Okay. All right. Joining us now
My brother.
Is
How's it, Junior? Is he a PDP man?
Biodun Shobi is here, a political analyst, to add his voice to what we're talking about here. It's nice to have you join me.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, I know you've been following developments across the country, and over the weekend we saw the suspension of the PDP national chairman. Now, I'd like you to see it from the perspective of the beauty of democracy. Let us, so that we can understand some of these things. Now, what do you make of challenges, crisis, disagreements within political parties when PDP, with its experience over the years, is supposed to be helping, to build democracy from one hand, the APC on the other hand, Labour Party on the, or whatever the thing is. But here we are, having only the APC one way or the other, as it seems, making a headway, with Labour Party in their own, PDP with all of the experience is not able to add up its own experience into the building of democracy at this time with what's going on. Or do you see what's going on with the challenges in the PDP as the beauty of democracy in itself?
Yeah, dissenting is part of the internal party democracy. And it strengthens party. People should be able to have their say, whether you disagree with the policy or you agree with it. There's nothing unusual about that. The most important thing is how these issues are resolved and managed, by the party leadership. If you look at the crisis in PDP, it didn't start just suddenly. It's simply because the zoning policy of the party was disregarded. Agreed. They all agreed to disregard it. No doubt about it. With this caveat that when, if Atiku emerges as or a Northerner, sorry, I withdraw that, a Northerner emerges as the presidential candidate, then the chairman of the party will step aside. That was the understanding which was made, it was in public, even Anyim himself spoke about it. Now, after that, he then chose not to comply with that when a Northerner emerged as a presidential candidate. So that gave, a fillip to whatever was brewing within the PDP. Then you now have a situation where the presidential candidate of PDP itself, Atiku Abubakar, made a slip at the Hariwa House when he said, oh no, vote for me. He tried to play the regional politics, not ethnic, regional politics. No, I'm from the north, don't vote for this, don't vote for that. That deepened feelings within the PDP camp, particularly the G5 integrity group. Now, PDP is already in a hole. It needs to come out of that hole, but the party continues to dig deeper, trying to expand the hole. That started with the process of trying to suspend some members of the party, which compelled Wike and a few others, to approach the court for protection. Shema was suspended, obviously for anti-party activity. He didn't hide it. He made it very, very clear as part of his own way of dissenting against the decision of the party over the zoning policy within the party. And then you had Autumn also, playing anti-party activity as a way of rebelling against the decision of the party, which not forcing IU out, basically. And that was his own explanation. So at a point in time, there has to be discipline. At a point in time, because you cannot allow a political party to continue to go
but
on that
who
drift.
disciplines
But
who now?
that's the issue.
In the mix, the way we see who disciplines who now?
That is the issue. The real problem is that the national chairman of the party is right at the center of the crisis. That is the major problem PDP is facing. Because you can't even convene the National Working Committee of PDP without the chairman's approval. And he's right at the center of that crisis. We now have what is similar to what happened to Adams Oshiomhole now happening. You have the ward chairman suspending the party chairman, and then the state chairman, the state party has to meet on this today. So eventually, how can you remain the chairman if you have been suspended? And they gave very valid reasons. They gave two of the reasons are very valid. One, that he has not paid subscription, which was exactly the case with Doyo Kukwe in Ogun State. If you remember the Labour Party leadership, I think the publicity secretary announced that, Arabambi, Comrade Arabambi, and they had to force him out from his position. The same thing is playing out now. So what you see, the end product of this is
they also
the goal
say he
to
didn't
get
vote in the
that he didn't vote, that he was not in his polling unit. He did not vote on that very day. He was not there to support his party. Those are the arguments. More or less, what they're saying is they are also accusing the national chairman of PDP of anti-party. So now when you have two cases of the leadership of PDP accusing some people of anti-party, and they in turn are accusing the national chairman of the party of anti-party, then we're in a serious problem here. Yeah. I will align with Segun on one thing, that PDP needs to get his house put his house in order. Otherwise, the party will go into oblivion if care is not taken. It's a party that has contributed tremendously to the growth of democracy in Nigeria. And it's strong, it has structures virtually everywhere. If the crisis is not properly managed in a way that members can feel, a sense of belonging, members can feel that they have a new, vibrant leadership, what will likely happen is that PDP may wither away and become a regional party. That is not what anybody wants. We want our democracy to, grow stronger and stronger by the day, not the decimation of political parties. Okay. And very importantly, the way the crisis in PDP is resolved, it's quite very significant for the way the political parties will manage crises, because there's no party that won't have one crisis or the other at one time or the other. The most important thing is internal dissent is an integral part of internal party democracy, and it has to be managed. That is what is not happening currently.
Okay. Segun, let me come to you. The point there is, in all of this, a lot of persons have blamed the presidential candidates, Atiku Abubakar.
For what?
They have said that, in fact, recall, I had spoken with Governor Wike at the time, who said that Atiku promised him after the presidential primaries that, in fact, came to him and said that you has to go, based on the gentleman agreements that, okay, if a northerner, a candidate from the north emerges, then the party chairman has to, step aside so that someone from the south will come in. And I recall that the back and forth of the G5 and Integrity Group, the name of Atiku Abubakar was called repeatedly as to him ensuring that there is reconciliation, ensuring that he calls the chairman to order. He ensures that what they are demanding for is looked into as a case may be. What is the role of Atiku Abubakar in all of this going on?
One thing about our democratic experience in Nigeria is that we sometimes don't differentiate between a president who has all the privileges and the powers in his party and his ability to, without even saying much, get people to behave, and a presidential candidate who does not have the legal authority to impose on the party. If Atiku had wanted Yoshe Ayu to go, how would he have done it? The laws of our parties are very clear. You might tell Ayu to resign, assuming you told him, and if Ayu did not resign, what next? If you take Ayu out without going through the right channel, then we're going to be locked into another Alimodu Sheriff type of case in court. It was not as simple as that. Perhaps people would have preferred that His Excellency Atiku Abubakar used his entire gravitas to show that he was not aligned with that position. And, you know, politicians will take decisions based on what they think is their overall best interest. That's now matter for historians to review. Because I remember I had a program here with Yori Folarin where I was very firm, trying to be cruel, to be kind, because I knew that the totality of what Governor Wike was managing was no longer ignorable. How do you ignore a governor who somehow is able to lead his fellow governor without being chairman of Governors Forum? How do you ignore a governor that has reach into other states that don't even have governors, other regions? So when you see that, you have to understand that it's not every day that you can try to show that you're going to use the hammer. Sometimes you have to really go on your knees and beg people, because maybe that would then persuade them on something that is more altruistic, and you can then get them to. So to blame Atiku is to say, couldn't Atiku have blamed them too for bringing Ayu? Was it Atiku that brought Ayu? They were the ones who wanted Secondus to go so desperately, and he went. And when Secondus then left, they then came up with all sorts of unity lists and all that. Ayu got trusted on us. Atiku only accepted the status quo that, okay, if this is the chairman, let's go to work. And now, is he the one that's going to tell Ayu to go? How? If he had been a sitting president, maybe by just signaling that, Ayu, can you please? Then Ayu will quickly understand that the powers of state and all of those undemocratic tendencies can work.
So there are different. If Atiku were the sitting
it's
president,
very hard for somebody that's not a sitting president to. You can't just compel people to behave. Okay. And let me just add to it. Look, I have become somewhat unsure of the totality of this American-style democracy we're copying. And I'll tell you 4 good reasons. The first is that I think the level of destabilization that it's causing is a bit too much. The second is that I'm thinking that this is damn too expensive. Not just in terms of money, even in terms of national psyche. You spend about a year to prepare for election. Then you win the election. Then you spend about 9 months to go through tribunal.
I recall a few years ago, I was also honored to have the 2 Showomis at the same time in the studio. Really amazing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, of course. All right, so before we went on the break, you were giving us about 4 or few reasons why things happen.
So I told you about the fact that it's expensive. I've told you about the fact that how long it takes even to do. So you have very little time for governance. And then the third one is that you kind of ask yourself, why is it that rather than us having political parties and political ideologies, why are we having a 5-dom of human personality? Even if you look at the ones that are claiming not to be destabilized now, the APC, you find out that it's as if you build everything in the image of one man. If he's a chairman, you're building this is not right. And then the final one is, you kind of like ask, what is the long-term vision for nations and for states? Is it better achieved under chaos or under a fairly well-measured, explainable, detailed, and straightforward way of succession? So we begin to look at the Chinese model and say, okay, if this American thing is like this, should we just go and take a look at the Chinese model? And you can see the results on the election. We have 93 million registered voters. And we're saying we have elected a president with just about 8 million votes. And the second person, 6 million, and the second person, 6 million. So it tells you that something is not right with what we're practicing. And it starts with the parties, democratic organizations, democratic nations. They know, and they ought to know, the Nigerians too should know, political parties are the first safeguards to democracy. Once political parties don't get their act together, you have started injuring democracy. It fits into this concept of, oh, should the president come to the north and should the other one come from the south and other. Again, you cannot carry your unitary system, military style of governance that is making you ask for restructuring. You can carry them into political parties. Political parties are fairly organic. You may, for all intents and purposes, you may say that, oh, we want to go to the presidency should come from the north or from the south. Let me just use the southern example. Oh, the president should come from the south. Then you'll ask yourself, if you were to truly be fair, is it not southeast? Have we not had a southwest, a south-south? Is it not only south? But you won't be able to say that because they're going to subject them to elections and somebody may win. You may say, okay, the president must come from the north. And then you may just get there. People will just say, another person, maybe some smart Joe will just go on a frolic of his own and people will follow him. And before you know what's happening, a southerner has won the election. We need to understand that we are not helping the cause of our own national development. If we're too fixated on the character of the man, we should be more interested in the process. We should be more interested in the institution. We should be more interested in the rules. We should be more interested in the ideology. Would the PDP chairman, you tell me that he's unaware that there's crisis almost everywhere in the country? And then when you start to suspend, why are you suspending some and not suspending the other? Is there a reason why Chibode George has not been suspended? Is there a reason why some of the people that are... So you will see that when you think that you need to suspend almost everybody, then you better tell yourself that you better not suspend anybody so we can all come back to our default mode. It was started by associations who agreed that let's go and seize power. So you better come back to that default and say, okay, all have sinned and fallen short of glory. Can we just start all over again and start to de-escalate? You can't be adding fire to it. I'm not necessarily saying that I can't see some of the anti-party activities. I can see them. But a leader manages things to get better outcome. A leader does not try to manage things so that the outcome becomes worse than what you're managing. Now he's suspended. How are we supposed to look at ourselves in the face knowing fully well that our national chairman has been suspended? Exactly. So, we must go back to the front. I want to beg everybody, please, guys, leaders, think about how long we have felicitated together as party men. And think about all of the good time. If we're not having it good today, remember that the people that are in power too today, they had about 16 years of waiting for us. Everybody will follow his curve. We have lost Peter Obi. Imagine if Peter did not even leave the party. Can you imagine the phenomenon would have beaten them on one go? Imagine if Wike was not angry. Who the hell are these people that would beat? Who beat them silly? Imagine if Shema was not upset. Would they even win us in Oyo? So this is the thing. You can do the mapping of our numbers. And you can see all the places where we lost big numbers. And you can put it down to the fact that PDP was the one that went to go and lose that election by itself. And there's enough blame to go around. Because you can't have a situation in your mind where you're thinking that your whole idea of managing party, even as a leader or a presidential candidate, whatever, is that you're not going to concede nothing. You can't bring me to a negotiation table where you are not willing to concede nothing. No matter how unreasonable my demand is, I must leave the negotiation table believing that you conceded something. So the more you didn't concede, the more they dug in. The more they dug in, the more they did media. The more they did media, the more they escalated narrative. The more they escalated narrative, the more difficult it was for us. And now we have lost. And how happy can we possibly be when the Nigerian people were truly looking for a rescue? And suddenly, the people that have not done well are most likely going to form government. How does that even make all of us feel? That party that won the election, the APC, did not do well. Call a spade a spade. How do you explain that you are using money to buy money? How do you explain that you can't fix petrol scarcity, the longest we've ever had? How do you explain that you had the longest period of ASU strike? People didn't go to school. How do you explain the fact that we have this kind of biting unemployment? And how do you then explain, because of the irresponsibility of the opposition party that is supposed to go and challenge for power, they're going to go and form government. And now they're going to form government, and we know how they behave. Let us just hope that if they get to form government, because we're still in court with them, let us just hope that they themselves will understand that you can't have 12 states. PDP has 12 states. Peter Obi will have, Labour Party has 11 plus Abuja, which is another 12. You can't have the country divided into 3. One for the northerner, one for the southerner, one for the Igbos, and not think that we have a problem on our hand. And when you have that kind of problem, you can't have a national chairman of the main opposition party Just with due respect, suspending people that he knows they're going to bring another reaction. Who's going to call everybody back from the brink? It's his duty. I've not seen them set up one simple reconciliation committee to go around that. Don't you need to beg people? Do you really want to lose Shema? Do you really want to lose Fayose Anyim? Are you truly willing to lose Wike? What are you going to do with what's going to be left? Thank you.
All right. Those are very strong and deep questions. Speaking to the leadership of your political
Of course.
party. The point there is it's time for national rebirth, as the case may be. But let's come back to what Segun was saying earlier. Now, political parties, when we talk about democracy, political parties seem to be the vehicle, the most visible vehicle, apart from other institutions, that. But political parties seem to be the number one vehicle that carries democracy, as the case may be, because they form government. And then government implement and government execute policies and create policies and so on. Now, when he talked about the issue of, are we getting used to this thing, this system of government and so on, some persons have argued that the military has done us a very big injustice, that the time we're supposed to be learning from the 1966 up until, 79 came and all of that, up until when military left in 1998 or 1999, that if we had continued in democracy, we would have made all of these mistakes sometime maybe in the 60s or 70s, and by now would have at least become strong and firm with understanding the rudiments of what our institutions should look like. What do you say to this?
Yeah, that's true. To a large extent, the military intervention in politics, in our political history, was not very helpful at all. It was a big setback. It didn't allow our democracy to grow. But we should not forget that you need to go back to 1963 to understand that when the military government led by Fayose actually scrapped federalism and then replaced it with a unitary system of government, which was more convenient, for him, trying to arrange the society along the military formation, and that obviously did not work. Led to so many crises, left, right, and center, until when we had democracy again in 1979. Now, our experience since then, we should have grown and learned a bit more than what we have learned. The problem I see is that we do not have ideological political parties. Our parties are arranged along individual interest, interest of groups of friends coming together, but not around a particular ideology, which a common shared beliefs and values, which would drive the political party and drive national development. So in our own case, we're doing it the other way around. So it's like our own homegrown democracy. That's the way I can put it, which does not fit into the pattern which is expected elsewhere. Now, in addition to that is the cost. Is the cost of the presidential system of government which we are practicing currently is so huge to the extent that it's sucking up a lot of resources needed for national development, needed for capital development, capital projects are being used just to service structures, either the political party structures or quangos in government. And that's the experience. That is what we're beginning to see. And it's simply because we still do not have an ideological orientation. No,
but how do we build that? Where do we start to begin to imbibe that ideological orientation from? Because you're still going to come from the political parties.
Yes. The way we've organized the political party currently, it's just like any other political parties elsewhere. It's an association of people with shared, with like minds.
And so on, yeah.
But in our own case, the issue of values, the core values that should drive national development, the core values that should tie and beliefs that should tie the political party together seems to be absent in our own case. You see a mixed match. Let me give you a good example. What is Peter Obi doing in Labour Party? Peter Obi is a pure capitalist. Labour Party is formed by the trade union formed the Labour Party, and it was the whole idea was to push for a mass-based approach to national development, not to be a private sector-led approach to national development. Peter Obi, coming from that angle of private sector interest, coming to take over the leadership of Labour Party seems to me an anomaly. That is why when the trade union movement, the Nigerian Labour Congress leadership, did ask Peter Obi to adopt the NLC Charter of Demands. That's the reason why they could not produce their manifesto in time. They told him to adopt the NLC Charter of Demands. Patutomi and others sat on it for professors. They could not marry the two together because they are true contradictory approaches to national development. And that was a major... So they eventually had to come up with something, a mismatch somehow, which will be eventually presented as a manifesto. So that's the point. When you have association of people with different interests, different values, different core beliefs to form a political party, you will not have the unity of purpose driven by ideological orientation, ideological needs and beliefs. You won't have that. And that's exactly what we have in Nigeria currently. So our political parties are more or less association of friends. That's what we have. Not driven by shared values. It's strictly driven by political power. The need for political power. That is what is driving it. That explains exactly why you refuse to leave. Even to sacrifice for his own political party and say, look, I did promise this. Okay, Article 1 is a northerner. I have to, for the sake of my party, sacrifice my own position. He refused to do that because he's driven by the need to retain power. Apart from the presidential candidate, the chairman of the party is the most powerful person within the PDP. And he chose not to do that. So to now go around and start suspending people when you're already in a hole, you can't keep digging. You need to get out of that hole. So what he's doing currently is digging the hole. Now you have the state chapter, a ward in Benue State, now expanding, his own ward, expanding that hole bigger for him to say, okay, you are guilty of anti-party activities, we are suspending you. So where will that take the PDP at the end of the day? So this is the big error. I think it's time for the PDP as a party, to call all the stakeholders, ignore the issue of suspension, call all the stakeholders and see how they can fashion out a way out of this crisis. Otherwise, they face a further risk. Oyo State is still PDP controlled. Makinde is guilty of everything they will accuse Wike of, or Oton. River State is, or Ikeazu, or Ugwai, or Shema Damani. River State is still PDP controlled. That's another powerful state. If they lose those two big states, then what then happens? PDP's presence in the southern part of Nigeria, would almost be wiped out, apart from Osun State. They will end up becoming a regional party. That is the fact of the matter. They will no longer be a national party, which they've been priding themselves, from the beginning. In fact, at the point in time when Obasanjo was in power, PDP was priding itself as the biggest party in Africa. Not just in Nigeria, in Africa. Yeah. So what happened? How could they have mismanaged things to this extent that people can begin to see a kind of a decimation of a party that has ruled this country for 16 years? What happened? What are they getting wrong? So I think it's high time the PDP leadership, including His Excellency Atiku Abubakar, the chairman, Yoshiayu, or whether suspended or not, needs to call a stakeholders meeting. They need to forget the idea of suspending this, suspending that, and then try and resolve their internal problems themselves. It may mean having to tinker with the constitution of PDP again, because currently under this current dispensation, even if IU resigns, the next person taking over is a northerner.
Why is that?
Because of the constitution of PDP. Okay. What they've done is they've created a situation where if the chairman leaves for one reason or the other, if his tenure ends abruptly, the deputy, one of the deputy must come from his zone. Oh. So therefore, the problem is... So
the problem, even if IU leaves,
it's not the solution. That does address the concerns of Wike,
and the
Otom, and the rest of them. So I don't think it's something they can resolve mechanically. They really need to sit down, and organically work out a solution to the problem that the PDP is facing. Honestly speaking, I think the country will be better off to have a very viable opposition, at every point in time. Otherwise, our democracy will not develop the way it's supposed to develop.
Okay, Segun, I think we have very short time now. Ayodele Fayose, former governor of Ekiti State, was here on this platform during the elections, and he said something that, with the coming of the Labour Party and the way it is, if it is sustained that way, that PDP is the bigger loser, because originally, like you mentioned in passing earlier, all of these elements seem to have come from the People's Democratic Party. And he said that with all of this crisis going on and with the prominence of the Labour Party, that PDP might be going into extinction. What do you say?
Well, I don't exactly think that the PDP will go into extinction. I don't think so.
All right.
Look, the PDP, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo as first president, left the party. The party survived. Good luck, Ebele Jonathan, the man without a shoe, got presidency under PDP. His lukewarm season on the fence. The party is still existing. People, you see,
Before him was Yaradua.
yeah, they will leave and the party will you see. Well, nobody is afraid that PDP will go into extinction. That's not going to happen.
Okay.
That's just wishful thinking. The only thing is that, does the party want to prepare itself to be able to take power so it can influence policies and direct same? Then if its objective is first to be a party that can exist for all of time, and then to also be a party that can win elections, then it must clearly understand that there is no amount of infighting and, daggers drawn that helps that purpose. How did the APC, with so many people buying 100 million naira worth of form, how did they manage to become a party that could go into an election seemingly united? And the PDP, where the forms really didn't cost that much, are so divided. And okay, assuming you wanted to settle score, which is painful, and you have now settled the score with a whole general election, and the election is over, we're in court, we believe, okay, we'll see how far we can go with that. This is not the time for you to be grandstanding and just doing rubbish. This is the time for you to say, wow, did we do this much damage to ourselves? How do we recoil? And you can't recoil without calling these gladiators, because some of them have demonstrated that they have the tenacity to hold on to that position and just do everything, including throwing the kitchen sink to make a point. So you have to stop. And when you stop, you have to sincerely desire that everybody come back. Your desire cannot be you want to prove a point, you want to show them that. No, because in the first instance, these men whom you are suspending now, they used to be very, very loyal party leaders who will put everything on the line for the party. One or two recalcitrant ones are there, no doubt. Human nature can never have a piece of the graveyard.
Yeah.
But as the national chairman of the party, is that you going to tell me that his greatest desire is that the party should disintegrate under him? Now, it was okay for us to say, oh, a little to the left, APC, a little to the right, PDP. What about now that we have somebody in the middle? Now, the danger of the middle is that the middle is resembling a movement. The fastest way to implode the country is through a movement, because members of a movement don't need to be rational. They can lose an election and still think they won. And if their numbers are plenty, they can just get into the street and then you have a problem on your hands. So you really need people to be, sequestered and warehoused into parties so that you can, incubate them there and manage them there. But if you allow a movement, the nature of what we are now seeing, to now supplant the political party's strength, you will implode the country, because a movement may not win the election, and it'll be very difficult for a movement to convince its followers that, hey, we did well.
It looks like a mob action.
It will become a mob action, and that's why we're saying parties should just get their act together and stop this nonsense.
Okay. Well, I wish we had time to talk about
Create
this
more
more
time next
because
time.
Well, I have to create more time. We spent an hour talking.
Wow.
But thank you so much, Segun Showumi, for coming on the program.
Totally my
really
pleasure. Thank you for having us.
And your insight and perspective really amazing. Thank you.
If you will allow me to say this, I think I'm so impressed. Segun is not attacking APC.
No, I have no time for you guys today. There'll be a day for that.
He is looking into issues of his political party.
There'll be a day for APC.
His objective is very passionate about PDP.
Yes.
He wants a resolution to the problem.
No, of course. That's it. It's obvious. Thank you, Biodun Showumi. Thank you so much.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
gentlemen.
It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you.